I used to lie every evening at 5 o'clock. Not a big lie, just a small, clean one. The kind that sounds harmless when you say it with a smile. I'm just going home. That was what I told everyone at the office. I said it to the girls in accounting. I said it to the men in sales. I said it to the receptionist downstairs. I said it so often that even I almost believed it. But I was not going home. I was getting into my boss's black car, and every night I slept under his roof. If you had seen me back then, you would have made the same mistake everyone else did. You would have thought I was having an affair with a rich older man. You would have thought I was ambitious, dishonest, shameless, maybe even clever in a dangerous way. You would have been wrong. Because this is not a story about seduction. It is a story about hunger. It is a story about shame. It is a story about the kind of kindness that saves a life so quietly that most people looking from the outside never understand what really happened. My name is Clara Hayes. I was 25 years old when everything changed. At that time, I worked in a tall glass office building in the city. It was the kind of building that looked cold even in sunlight. Inside, everything was polished. The floors shined. The elevators smelled expensive. The people who worked there wore clean shirts, expensive perfume, smart shoes, and tired expressions. I was one of the youngest employees in the company. My position was low, my salary was small, my responsibilities were endless. I answered calls, scheduled meetings, carried files, organized presentations, printed reports, fixed small mistakes before they turned into big ones, and smiled at everyone whether they deserved it or not. My boss was named Victor Hale. He was the owner of the company. At work, people were afraid of him. He had a hard face, a sharp voice, and the kind of presence that changed the air in a room the moment he entered. Conversations died when he walked past. People sat straighter. They checked their work twice. They lowered their eyes. He was not cruel, exactly, but he was powerful, and powerful men do not need cruelty to make others nervous. That was the Victor Hale everyone knew. I knew another one, not at first, but eventually, yes. Every evening when the day ended, everyone else packed their bags and drifted toward their real lives. Some talked about dinner plans, some joked about traffic, some complained about husbands or boyfriends or children or gym memberships they never used. Then someone would ask me, "What about you, Clara?" And I would smile. "I'm just going home, I'm tired." They always nodded as if that made sense, and then I would wait in the lobby until the glass doors reflected only my own face and the city lights outside. A black car would pull to the curb. I would open the door, and Victor Hale would already be inside. Sometimes he drove himself. Sometimes he sat in silence for the first few minutes. Sometimes he looked at me and said in a voice nobody at the office would have recognized, "Did you eat today?" That question alone used to make my throat tighten, because there had been a time when the answer was no. To understand how I ended up in that car, you have to understand where I came from. I was born in a village so small that strangers were discussed for days after passing through it. There were no office towers there, no elevators, no women in heels carrying laptops, only narrow roads, small houses, fields, tired faces, and weather that mattered too much because crops depended on it. My father was a farmer. My mother kept the house. My younger brothers shared one room. My sister and I shared another. We were not unhappy, but we were poor in the way that makes every dream feel selfish. When I was younger, I used to stand outside our house in the evening and imagine another life. A city life. A clean life. A life where money arrived in envelopes or bank transfers instead of depending on rain and soil and luck. I wanted to help my family. I wanted to send money home. I wanted to become the kind of woman people pointed at and said, "She escaped." So when I got the chance to go to the city and work in an office, I took it. My mother cried when I left. My father tried not to. My sister hugged me at the bus station and whispered, "Don't forget us when you become rich." I laughed then. I thought richness was closer than it really was. When I first arrived in the city, I had one suitcase, one pair of decent shoes, a few pressed blouses, and a level of hope that only belongs to people who have not yet been introduced properly to rent, loneliness, and adult humiliation. I found a job at Hale and Mercer Holdings. I found a tiny apartment in a bad neighborhood. It was dark, narrow, and smelled slightly of old paint and damp walls. The window looked out onto another building so close I could have thrown a spoon into someone else's kitchen. At night, I heard arguments through the walls, televisions through the ceiling, babies crying 2 floors down, and pipes that shivered like the whole building was nervous. But it was mine. The first night I slept there, I lay on my cheap mattress under a thin blanket and smiled at the ceiling because I felt like an adult for the first time in my life. That feeling did not last. Every month my salary arrived. Every month I paid rent, bought food, covered transport, and sent most of what remained back home. I lied in my letters. I said the city was beautiful. I said I was doing well. I said my job was hard but exciting. I said I was proud and happy and safe. The truth was less beautiful. The city was lonely. The work was exhausting. My apartment was barely better than a box. And my boss, at that time, did not even seem to know my name. To Victor Hale, I was just one more efficient young woman moving through his system. That would have been fine. I had not come to the city for kindness. I had come for survival. And then the phone rang one Tuesday night. It was my younger sister. She was crying too hard to speak clearly at first. When I finally understood her words, the room around me changed. My father had collapsed in the field, his heart, the doctor, an operation, urgent, expensive. "How much?" I asked. She told me. It was a number that made me sit down. I checked my bank app while she was still talking. There was nowhere near enough. I went to the bank the next morning. I asked for a loan. They refused. I was too young. My salary was too low. I had no assets, no guarantor, no history worth trusting. I sat outside the bank afterward with my hands shaking in my lap, while the city moved around me as if none of it mattered. Men in suits crossed the sidewalk. A woman laughed into her phone. A bus sighed to a stop. Someone dropped coins. Someone cursed. The whole city continued. Meanwhile, my father's life had become a number I could not afford. That night, I sent every dollar I had. Not part of it, all of it. Rent money, food money, emergency money, every last piece. I messaged my sister, "Pay for the surgery. Save him." My father survived. My family called me crying with gratitude. My mother said I was an angel. My father, weak from the hospital bed, said only, "You should not have done this." But I had. And when the landlord knocked 6 days later asking for rent, I had nothing left. I begged. He did not care. "This is business," he told me. "People love saying that when they want to behave without mercy." By the next evening, I was out. I packed my suitcase, left the key on the table, closed the door behind me and stood on the pavement with nowhere to go. I told no one, not my family, because I had not saved my father just to become another problem, not my co-workers because shame is proud and hates witnesses, not my boss because why would a man like Victor Hale care where a woman like me slept? I had one old car, so I started living in it. At first I told myself it was temporary. 1 week, maybe 2. Then the days passed, and winter arrived. If you have never slept in a car during winter, you may think it sounds inconvenient. It is worse than inconvenience. It is humiliation that seeps into your bones. At night, I parked on quiet streets where I hoped nobody would notice me. I locked the doors, covered myself with 2 blankets, and curled into a shape smaller than my own life. My back hurt. My hips hurt. My neck stiffened. Cold entered through the windows and stayed. Some nights I woke up shivering so hard my teeth clicked. In the morning, I drove to a gas station before sunrise. I washed my face in a public bathroom, brushed my teeth, changed my clothes, fixed my makeup in a cracked mirror, and drove to work pretending I had just come from somewhere respectable. I was hungry almost all the time. At lunch, I drank water and said I wasn't hungry. When others invited me out, I said I had work to finish. When they brought back coffee, I smiled and thanked them like it was normal for caffeine to be the most solid thing in my body all day. This went on for 2 months, 2 long, cold, humiliating months. And then one morning, my body gave up before my pride did. Victor Hale asked for a file during a meeting. I stood to get it. The room tilted. My ears filled with a strange rushing sound, and then the floor came up hard. When I woke, I was lying on the leather sofa in Victor Hale's private office. The lights were lower. Someone had removed my shoes, and Victor Hale himself was standing near me holding a glass of water. I tried to sit up immediately. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry, I'll get back to work." He didn't move. "When did you last eat?" His voice was calm but not cold. I stared at him. He repeated the question. I wanted to lie, but something in his face made lying feel useless. "I don't know," I whispered. He sat down opposite me. "What is going on, Clara?" It is a dangerous thing when someone asks the right question in the wrong moment. Because sometimes the truth comes out not because you are brave, but because you are too tired to hold it anymore. I started crying, not gracefully, not quietly, not in a way I would have chosen. I told him everything, my father, the surgery, the money, the eviction, the car. When I reached that last part, his expression changed completely. "You sleep in your car?" I nodded. "In this weather?" I nodded again. He stood up too fast and turned away for a moment. I thought he was angry at me. I thought I had ruined everything. "I'm sorry," I said again. "Please don't fire me." He turned back so sharply that I stopped crying from surprise. "Fire you," he said. "Clara, I am not going to fire you." He looked furious. Not with me. With himself, he said a moment later, quieter. "I see you every day. I should have known something was wrong." Then he picked up his coat. "Get your things." I blinked. "What?" "We're getting your car. And then you're coming to my house." I thought I had heard him wrong. "Your house?" "Yes." I stared at him. He spoke as if explaining something painfully obvious. "I have more rooms than I use. I live alone. You are not sleeping in a freezing car another night." I shook my head immediately. "No, I can't. That's not right." "I am not asking whether it feels right. You're my boss, and you are a human being." His voice softened slightly. "You need help. I can help. That is the end of the argument. He almost smiled when he said it, but he was serious. So that evening, I drove my old car behind his expensive one through streets I had only seen from buses and taxis. We entered a quiet neighborhood with wide trees and large gates and houses that looked like they had never known real fear. His house was beautiful. Not loud rich, old rich, warm lights, wooden floors, tall windows, a garden in the back, books on shelves, framed photographs, the kind of silence that belongs to places where people have eaten well and slept safely for generations. He showed me to a guest room on the second floor. It had a large bed, soft lamps, a private bathroom, a window overlooking the garden. I stood in the middle of the room feeling more shocked than grateful, because sometimes kindness can be harder to receive than cruelty. "Why?" I asked him. He looked tired all of a sudden. "My daughter," he said. "She lives overseas. We hardly speak. But if she were ever in trouble, I would want someone to help her. That is enough reason." That night, I took the longest shower of my life. I ate hot food at a polished kitchen table. I slept in clean sheets. I woke up the next morning still in disbelief. That was the first night. There were many after it. At the office, nothing changed on the surface. He was still Mr. Hale. I was still Miss Hayes. He gave instructions. I carried them out. We remained professional. No one saw the evenings. No one saw that once the office emptied and the building lost its performance, he became someone else entirely. Not soft, exactly, but human. We drove home. I cooked because he was useless in kitchens. He complained about investors and supply chains. I told him what had gone wrong in scheduling or admin. He corrected my business vocabulary. I corrected his opinion on seasoning. He brought me books, real books, on management, finance, leadership, negotiation. "You are too intelligent to stay where you are," he told me one night. "I'm trying to survive," I said. "Yes," he replied, "and after that you should try to rise." He started teaching me. Not like a boss teaching an assistant, more like a strict father teaching a daughter the world he knows too well. How to read numbers, how to see weakness in a proposal, how to listen in meetings, how to speak less and say more, how to never apologize for taking up space if you've earned it. At home, he was even funny sometimes, not intentionally. He had a large dog named Winston who loved me immediately and ignored him whenever possible. Watching one of the most feared men in the office lose arguments to a dog healed something in me I had not known needed healing. And for a while I was happy. Not romantic happy, not fantasy happy, safe happy. There is a difference. Then people at work started noticing things. Suspicion begins with tiny details. Someone sees a car. Someone notices timing. Someone senses preference. Someone resents kindness they do not understand. A woman named Naomi from operations cornered me one afternoon by the printer. "I saw you leaving with him," she said. "With who?" She smiled coldly. "Don't be stupid." I felt heat rise in my face. "He needed help with files," I said. "At 6:30? "It was urgent." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she leaned closer. "People are talking." There it was. The thing I had feared without naming. Not because I believed them, because I knew how stories work. They prefer scandal to truth. Scandal is more entertaining. Truth asks too much of people. Soon I felt it everywhere. Conversations stopping when I entered the lunchroom. Eyes lingering too long. Whispers near the elevators. They thought I was sleeping with my boss, not sleeping under his roof in the guest room because I had nowhere else to go. No, sleeping with him, using him, manipulating him, benefiting from him. I wanted to tell them the truth, but truth would require confession. It would require me to say, I was homeless, I was hungry, I lived in my car. I fainted from exhaustion because I could not afford lunch. Shame would not let me. So I carried the gossip in silence. One night I cried while chopping onions in Victor's kitchen. He walked in, took one look at my face, and said, "Tell me." I tried the usual lie. "It's just the onions." "No, it isn't." So I told him. He listened without interrupting. Then he said very quietly, "You can move out if you want, but do not do it because foolish people need a cheap story to explain what they don't understand." I looked at him. "You have done nothing wrong," he said. "Neither have I." He sat across from me at the kitchen table. "You are learning faster than anyone I have ever trained. You work harder than half the executives in my building. One day you will outrank most of the people whispering about you. Do not run from people whose only power is gossip." His words steadied me, not because they solved the problem, because they reminded me that the problem was not my existence. It was their imagination. So I stayed, and I worked harder than ever. I arrived earlier, studied later, read the books he gave me, asked sharper questions, learned the business beyond my role. 6 months later, there was a large internal meeting. Department heads, managers, staff, executives. Victor stood at the front of the conference room and announced there would be a promotion. The company needed a new project manager. He described the role in hard, demanding terms. Then he said my name. The silence that followed was immediate and electric. People clapped, but it sounded hesitant. Then Naomi stood up. Of course it was Naomi. "Is this fair?" she asked loudly. "We all know why she got this job." The room went dead still. I could hear my own heartbeat. Victor did not raise his voice. "Yes," he said. "Clara lives in my house." The room reacted exactly the way you would expect. Shock, movement, eyes turning toward me like I had become a fire. He continued before anyone else could speak. "She lives in my guest room because when I found out she had spent 2 months sleeping in her car after sending all her money home to save her father's life, I offered her a safe place to stay." Nobody moved. Nobody made a sound. "She did not ask me for anything," he said. "She did not use me. She did not manipulate me. She came to work every day hungry, exhausted, and ashamed, and still outperformed people who had every comfort she lacked." Then he looked around the room. "Since staying at my home, she has studied every evening. She knows this company better than most of you. She earned this promotion. If anyone has a professional objection, make it now." Naomi sat down. Her face had gone pale. Nobody spoke. After the meeting, people approached me differently. Not warmly, not instantly, but differently. Some apologized, some congratulated me, some avoided me out of embarrassment. That evening, when I got into the black car, I did not feel like I was hiding anymore. I looked at Victor and said, "Thank you." He started the engine. "No," he said. "Now they know the truth. That is enough." I still lived in his house after that. Not forever, but long enough to save money properly, long enough to breathe, long enough to believe I might deserve a future bigger than survival. Eventually, I moved out. Not because I was forced to, because I was ready. I rented a better apartment, Then later, a small townhouse. And years after that, I bought a home of my own. Victor came to see it the day I signed the papers. He stood in my kitchen and said, "The cabinets are terrible." I laughed and said, "You taught me confidence, not taste." Winston, much older by then, lay under the table like he owned the place. Victor never became less intimidating at work, but outside work, he remained one of the best men I have ever known. Not because he rescued me, because he never made me feel like rescue was a debt. He gave me shelter, then dignity, then education, then distance enough to stand on my own feet. That is rarer than kindness. That is wisdom. So yes, for a time I slept under my boss's roof every night. And yes, people judged me. They made the easy story because the true one would have required them to think harder, feel more deeply, and question the small cruelty of their own assumptions. But I am not ashamed of my story. I am proud of it. I was poor. I was hungry. I was homeless. I was humiliated. I was helped. I worked. I learned. I rose. And if you are listening to me now, while carrying your own private shame, your own impossible problem, your own season of survival, I want you to know something. There is no dignity in suffering silently just because silence looks stronger. Sometimes strength is asking for help. Sometimes survival looks ugly before it looks brave. Sometimes the person who saves you is not the person the world expects. And sometimes the life you thought was ending is only forcing you into the first chapter worth telling. My name is Clara Hayes. I rode home with my boss every night. I slept in his house. I built my future there. And when people whispered, they were seeing scandal. What was really happening was grace.